We have a very special guest alert on today's show because we are bringing on The Athletic's Daniel Popper to talk about the latest position battles coming out of training camp, how impressed he has been with Zion Johnson, and if the Derwin James deal is a done deal on today's Locked On Chargers podcast.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers together for over 6 seasons now, but we're heading into our 5th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys so much for making this your first listen today. And to make sure that you never miss the show, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. But you guys made it for today's show, which means you get Daniel Popper, I think, putting out the best training camp content of anyone out there, any writers out there for sure. And we have him coming on the show today to talk about what's going on at the wide receiver 3 between Josh Palmer and Jaylen Guyton, the update in Storm Norton versus Trey Pipkins. How good is Zion Johnson doing? We're getting into all that, as well as Justin Herbert's development, if the Derwin James deal is a done deal, and even the RB2 spot that's definitely up for grabs behind Austin Eckler. But here he is, Daniel Popper. All right, guys, we are here with the very special guest that we are so excited to have on, the man who is a one-man army out at Chargers training camp. We have Daniel Popper, a senior writer from The Athletic who covers the Chargers. You can find him on Twitter at Daniel R. Popper. But more importantly, if you guys want to know what's happening literally at every single training camp practice, this is the only dude I know that's putting out content after every practice. It's the first place I go when I don't get to go to practice myself. So Daniel, thank you for coming on. If you guys haven't already, go subscribe to The Athletic. It's more than worth it. But thank you, sir.
Of course. This is why I love coming on here, because you do all the pitching for me. I don't even have to promote myself at all, because you do it better than I could ever do it. So I appreciate you guys as always.
I set an incredibly high bar for myself early on, and ever since I've just been trying to find a way to match that. But I think obviously when you're talking about training camp, the biggest thing is, position battles, right? And I think certain ones lend themselves to being evaluated in training camp, especially early on, better than others, specifically having pads on or not. But one of the biggest battles easily is between Jaylen Guyton and Joshua Palmer for wide receiver 3. So I've seen some great things about Jaylen Guyton. I was there for some good one-on-one reps with him at practice, but it seems like most of the buzz has been on Josh Palmer early on. Do you think that he has created separation in that race?
So I love that you started with this question, because I think the conversation around those two guys is a little misguided right now, because, and I say this because they do different things, right? They have very different skill sets, and that's what you want out of a wide receiver group. And Brandon Staley has actually related it's like the starting 5 for a basketball team, right? Yeah. You want your center and power forward, your big bodies like a Mike Williams. You want your point guard, your small slot receiver, short area type guy like Keenan Allen. There's all different types. You want your speedster, your wing, 3-and-D wing, right? It's like you can draw these parallels. You want guys that can do different things. And Josh Palmer and Jaylen Guyton do very different things. Jaylen Guyton is a 4-3 burner, can get down the field and stretch the defense deep. Josh Palmer isn't necessarily that guy, but what he does have is really sharp route running. He's great in the short area of the field. He can play inside. He can play outside. He can play kind of that big slot role that's become a big trend in the NFL this year. And he's great in contested catch situations. So you have two different skill sets there. Josh Palmer is going to get more snaps as a third wide receiver. That is not up for a debate. But it's going to be a situation like it was last year where Joe Lombardi and Chris Beatty, the wide receivers coach, can make a decision. Hey, what are we trying to accomplish with this play? If that third wide receiver needs to run a post down the middle of the field and you're looking to take a shot off play action, who does that better? Jaylen Guyton. But if you're looking for that third wide receiver to run a 5-yard in on third down and win in a contested catch situation, potentially in a lot of traffic in the middle of the field, who does that better? Josh Palmer. So I don't think it's a situation where one guy is going to win that battle. I think Josh Palmer is going to play more, but it's going to be dictated by the situation and what they're trying to accomplish with the scheme and the play call.
Yeah, just having different players to be able to do different things when you need them to do that.
That's why that conversation is so tough, though, right? Because it's like they do such different things, but they're trying to find a way to get him on the field. And it's just like, yeah, but there's certain plays where you want a guy that runs a 4-3 and certain plays where you don't necessarily need that.
Yeah, and let me just add this. Like, I know a lot of people are talking about how good Josh Palmer, like Jaylen Guyton is getting open, like a lot. Right. And, some of it has been the quarterbacking. Like Easton Stick had him on a go route on Wednesday and just overthrew him. And it wasn't a particularly good ball. Jaylen got his hands on it, hit the ground, it came out. It's hard to put that on him. Like if Justin's playing in that spot, he probably puts it on him for a touchdown. So you can only, when you're playing with the second and third teams, you can really gauge, okay, is this guy winning consistently, with what he's being asked to do? And Jaylen Guyton is winning consistently in the deep area of the field. And so I think like that's what he's going to bring to this offense is that element. He's always brought that element, and he's looked really good, and he's going to fit into this offense in that role.
Well, that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that Jaylen Guyton's doing his thing and his speed is still translating here in his third year. From a personnel standpoint, the biggest question mark on the roster is obviously right tackle. So now with the pads on, the Chargers can truly kind of start that evaluation process of Storm Norton and Trip Hipkins. What do you think? Who do you think has been more impressive so far in training camp?
It's been pretty even, and it's early days, right? It's early days. You're not going to pick a winner in after 2 days of padded practices, right? But they both look like they're improved. Just watching one-on-ones, they really held their own. Like Storm had a really impressive rep against Joey. Joey came back and beat him with an inside move later in that series with a little bit of a changeup. But I think they've both looked solid, and a lot of this is going to come down to the preseason games. Like that's going to be really, really important. I had a nice chat with Brendan Nugent, the offensive line coach, after practice on Tuesday. And he's like, in an ideal world, one of these guys is going to separate themselves. And we're looking for, is there a day where there's some separation? I don't think that's happened yet. This is still even an open competition. The way they're approaching it is they're going to give each guy even reps. And that's how it's gone. I mean, like no guy has a leg up right now. So one day it'll be Storm's the first guy on the field. He'll get his 3 reps with the first team, and then on will come Trey, and he'll get his 3 reps. The next day, it'll be Trey on the field first. He'll get his 3 reps, and then Storm will come on. Both guys are getting reps with the second team as well, so they're getting a lot of work there at right tackle. And then what really matters is, okay, when you get to the preseason games, what does it look like, and who's performing at a higher level? And that's what it's going to come down to, who can show up in those games. And then obviously, like as they have more padded practices, this weekend is going to be really important. You've got some padded practices this weekend, including a scrimmage on Sunday, which is going to be as close to live as this team will get in training camp. And so there's a long way to go. Right now, it's neck and neck. I would not say that one guy has a step on the other. They're pretty even. But I think, talking to Brendan Nugent and from what I'm seeing myself, I think they believe that both these guys are pretty significantly improved in pass protection specifically. And we'll see how that sort of shakes out in the one-on-ones and in the padded practices and preseason games to come.
And I was there Monday, and Khalil Mack was about to go up against Trey Pipkins too on that last rep, and then they blew the horn. And I was like, oh, I wanted to see that, because I mean, let's be honest, the Rashawn Slater Khalil Mack thing was like football pornography or something like that. Was just a violent, just gnarly matchup. But I think that day was about Zion Johnson. When I think back to 2021 Chargers training camp, I think back to you and your first reaction when Rashawn Slater went up against Joey Bosa the first time. You're like, oh my God, guys, like just stood up Joey Bosa like that. You can't do that as a rookie. It seemed like Zion Johnson at least had a little bit of that moment, right? When he had his first padded practice on Monday, had some really impressive reps against Sebastian Joseph, right, against Morgan Fox, put Jerry Tillery on the ground. How impressed were you with seeing him for the first time in pads, knowing how important he is as the starter at right guard right away?
Yeah, it's a great point because that's exactly what I thought of. Because I remember, I'll always remember that. For the rest of my life, I'll always remember that 2021 practice when when Rashawn Slater faced off with Joey Bosa that first time, and you're just like, yep, that's it. And there was a lot of contrast, right? Because for 2 seasons, I had been covering a certain level of offensive line play and watching this offensive line week after week on tape. I had never really seen what it was supposed to look like. And then you see it and you're like, okay, there it is. That guy is going to be a real NFL player. And it was the same thing with Zion Johnson. His first rep, he lost to Austin Johnson. But as soon as that happened, he had 3 straight reps where it was just like dominant against Morgan Fox, against Sebastian Joseph Day, against Jerry Tillery. He pancaked him. And the thing that jumps out about Zion is just how strong he is. Like he, at a young age, to be that strong, to have grown man strength as a rookie at that age is really impressive. And he was going up against, some pretty established interior defensive linemen in that series. And then, just talking to people in the organization, just what he's doing, in the run blocking in 11 on 11. It's really hard to like gauge that when you're watching live from different angles and trying to be able to see over players and stuff like that. But from what they're seeing, like he's equally as impressive in the run game in terms of opening up holes and that sort of thing. So, you see it right away. Like with offensive linemen, you can see like, okay, this guy's going to have a little bit of a learning curve, or this guy's going to be a real player from day one. And Zion Johnson fits into that second category. I think they hit a home run with this pick, and I'm really excited to watch him play in live action.
Me too. I mean, and just hearing what some of the other guys said just about how smart he is, not messing up at practice, like
right. That's a great point. What Corey said about him was really noteworthy, I think.
Totally, yeah. And like when these NFL veterans are surprised by your strength, that's saying something. Like that's not something that should be taken lightly, because these dudes are all incredibly strong. But that dude also, led the combine in bench press reps. So yes, he's very, very strong. But we do have more guys to talk about, including Justin Herbert going into year 2 of Joe Lombardi's offense, and also Daniel Popper asking every single day about the Derwin James extension just to have Brandon Staley shuck him off. And we're going to get into that coming up right after this. Before we get back to Daniel Popper, there is an app I need to tell you guys about, and it's the Dave app. I think all of us have been in a spot where you need a couple extra dollars for gas money, you have a wedding present that you didn't think about that you need to get, or you just need to catch up on all of your bills. That's where the Dave app can come in, because Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with their extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, more money to buy that wedding gift you didn't think about, and more money just to have so you're not stressing out until the end of the month. You can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest. There's no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app so they can get the financial relief that they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need some help, make sure you download the Dave app and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees apply. Banking provided by Evolve. Member FDIC.
All right, guys, we are back here with the Athletics Chargers beat reporter Daniel Popper here, of course, the one and only. And how did we get so far into an interview without talking about Justin Herbert? Well, that stops right now. Justin Herbert is now entering year 3 in the league and year 2 in Joe Lombardi's offense. Do you think that continuity and comfortability has shown itself so far in training camp?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just the way he's operating on the field, the command that he has, and what a lot of people are talking about, and you can see it, is just the conversations he's having after plays, right? Like going up to guys and saying and having conversations about, hey, what did you see there? Let's make this tweak. Yeah. Let's make this tweak here in the scheme or on this play and this route, the little details. And that's what it's all about, right? Once and Joe Lombardi said, like, hey, it's football 101 last year, but this year, we're starting with football 202 stuff. And you're seeing that in terms of how he's operating. And every guy that we've talked to a man has said, you are seeing him take more ownership, be more involved in these conversations. And it's not the surface level overarching general stuff. It's the really minute details, stuff like cadence, for example. And we've already seen Justin draw the defense offside. He did it with Michael Davis in the 2-minute drill on Wednesday, where he switched up his cadence and Michael Davis jumped and touched the receiver on the outside, and they picked up 5 free yards. It didn't end up amounting to anything, but that's the kind of stuff he wasn't doing last year. Right. Like every time it was like, all right, we're going on 1, boom. But what's crazy? What can you do when all of a sudden you're operating on a different level and you can change up your cadences and change up your snap counts?
Well, it helps your offensive line too,
right?
Tremendously.
Right. Yeah. Exactly, to get the defense a little bit off balance. Like those little things really matter, because winning in the NFL is about finding advantages in the margins, and that's what they're going to start seeing. With Justin Herbert, the physical tools pop out, but it's going to be the mastery of this offense where you're going to see Justin Herbert take that next step and really start to flourish and reach like the type of MVP levels that I think he's going to reach this year.
Oh, for sure. I mean, that dude 100% could win MVP, and it wouldn't be that surprising at all with his ability, right? But it is so much mental at this point too, and I feel like he's already ahead of where most quarterbacks at this age are mentally. So he's at a pretty good spot. But the other part of the jumping off sides thing is like, what other quarterback in the NFL do you want more with a free play to throw it as far as you're allowed to than Justin Herbert with no ramifications if it gets intercepted? So I would like to see more of those.
And just think about, like, that hasn't really happened. Like how many? Never. Like I can't think of a specific example.
I can't think of the last couple of years. Yeah.
Right, but think about how many times Aaron Rodgers does that in a season.
Oh yeah.
And
how many times Phillip did it?
Right, yeah, Phillip, these guys. And actually, Austin Eckler, like, directly, compared what Justin is looking like this season to what Phillip was at. Not saying that they're the same, right, but it's reminding him of that progression, right? Because Phillip would get to the line and like change the play and move guys around, and he was basically running the offense himself. And like they feel like Justin can become that, right, and they're starting to see signs of him becoming that this training camp. And it's like, cool. And this is what I've been talking about all off season is like the question is, how good can Justin Herbert be? When you marry one of the greatest physical school skill sets that we've ever seen with like that level of processing, and then the banked experiences and the master of the offense and understanding what defenses are trying to do to him, like how good can he be? I can't answer that question because the answer might be the best quarterback in football. Like that honestly might be the answer. Yeah, exactly. So I think everyone in that offense, everyone around the team is just super excited about that component of things for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, I mean, how could you not be? And Phillip Rivers used to drive me crazy because it's like, you want to talk about a snap count? Like that dude would go down to 1 second every single time. And it's like, that's the best thing in the world for a defensive lineman to have you doing that. Like it used to drive me nuts.
Yeah.
But one of the main things about this training camp specifically is the Derwin James hold in, right? And you said it was a hold in, and that's right, because he is going through walkthroughs. He's showing up to the practices. Doesn't seem like there's any ill will towards the organization to this point, right? Not like some of the nastier holdouts that you've seen around the NFL. It seems like everything's in good spirits, but it is also like, hey, lock up one of the most important players in this franchise, right? I mean, he is the face of a franchise at this point. He was at every big landmark thing through the offseason, and all the reports coming out, everyone's optimistic that a deal gets done too. Right? Is that how you're feeling about it at this point? Is this pretty much a done deal?
Yeah, it's going to get done. I mean, you don't bring the guy out to your groundbreaking, for the new
get him splashed with holy water.
Right. That was we can talk about that if you want to. But bring him out to the groundbreaking, right? For your facility that's opening up in 2024 if you're not planning on signing this guy long term.
That dude's not going to be here in 2024. Yeah.
Right. And the one thing I will say is, usually, you get into these types of negotiations and everyone jumps on the team, right? Why hasn't the team gotten it done? Why hasn't the team gotten it done? But it takes two sides to get a deal done. And there's certainly a possibility in this situation that the team has made a really good offer that would make Derwin James the highest paid safety in the league. And Derwin and his camp are, holding strong to try and get as much money as they possibly can, or get more guaranteed money. Get
for
more
a player
money,
who's been very injured, right?
Get more money guaranteed for injury. Right. And I think when the negotiation drags on a little bit longer, you got to look at the specific situation and why that would be happening. You have a player here who, when he's on the field, is an all-pro level player and does things that no other player in the NFL pretty much can do. But he missed 27 out of 32 games in 2020, 2019 and 2020, right? So that's part of it. Like, it's a really unique situation in terms of negotiating the contract because there is that facet to it. And if you're a team, you have to try and protect yourself against that type of situation.
Right.
If you're the player, you're like, you want as much guaranteed as money because that inevitably is in the back of your mind, right? So like,
has to be.
I think a negotiation, you have to look at both sides, right? And it's not just like, why hasn't the team gotten it done? It's why haven't the two sides been able to find middle ground? And I think it's exactly what we're saying. It's a unique situation. And Derwin and his camp are obviously going to try and get as much money as possible. And the Chargers are going to try and make a good deal. And the one thing I will say is the Chargers don't make bad deals. Ed McGuire is their cap guy, and he's the one that does most of the negotiating with the agents, and he does a hell of a job. Like, go look.
There's like zero dead cap space. Yeah.
There's a reason that the Chargers year after year after year are among the lowest teams in dead money, right? It's because they are always looking for value in these contracts. They don't really make bad deals in free agency. Brian Bulaga aside, I think that was like a desperate move to try and patch up the offensive line. It didn't work out, and it didn't seem like a great deal at the time, right? But those are outliers. Otherwise, like a lot of these, I mean, you can go back to Casey Hayward, right? Finding him as a diamond in the rough. The Corey Linsley deal has worked out really, really well. And they always set up these contracts, right? Matt Filer. So they always set up these contracts where they can get out of them at the right time. And so, you're looking at a team that's always makes really good deals and rarely gets beaten, right, by agents on these deals. And then you're looking at Derwin's camp and his agent, David Mullighetto, who obviously is really, really good at his job. And his job is to get the most for his players. I mean, he got a fully guaranteed contract, the most guaranteed money ever given to a player who might miss the entire season because of suspension, in Deshaun Watson. So it's like, it's a perfect storm for something like this to happen, but it's going to get done. It's going to get done. I can guarantee you that. The question is when, and we'll see how that plays out.
Yeah, well, Brandon Staley has called Derwin James the quarterback of the defense, and Tom Telesco definitely went out there and made sure that his defensive quarterback had a lot of new weapons to play with, and they really needed to. They had to improve a very, very bad defense from last year. With all of those additions coming into camp, how do you think that those pieces are fitting? Do you think they're gelling early on?
Yeah, I've been really impressed with how fast it's gelled, because usually when you bring in so many new pieces,
that's a lot of new starters. Yeah.
I actually went through it. It's potentially eight new starters.
Yeah.
Like, we can go through them here. Sebastian Joseph Day and Austin Johnson on the defensive line. You're going to have Khalil Mack at edge rusher. You're going to have Kyle Van Noy at linebacker. You're going to have Bryce Callahan in the slot. You're going to have J.C. Jackson on the outside. And then
maybe Troy Reeder.
And if Drew's out, you might potentially, So I threw Troy Reeder in there because he's playing right now with Drew out. So, like, if Drew isn't ready for the start of the season, you potentially looking at 8 out of 11 new players. And yet they've been better than an offense that's bringing back pretty much everybody. And all we're talking about is the continuity on offense, whether it's the coaching, whether it's the personnel. And yet the defense has been playing better than the offense so far in camp. And I think the biggest thing when we're talking about this is just how many of these guys have played in the scheme before. Like, they're starting from a level that's a little bit ahead of where you normally would when you're bringing in that many new players, because Troy Reeder's been in the scheme, and Khalil Mack has been in the scheme, and Bryce Callahan has been in the scheme, and Sebastian Joseph Day has been in the scheme. So in each of these position groups, right, you have a guy that has played there before. And yeah, the language changes slightly from year to year, but the overarching ideas in the scheme are the same. You understand it from a fundamental level if you've played in the scheme before. Bryce Callahan, has only played in this scheme his whole entire career, whether it was in Chicago or Denver. So I think that's a big part of it, right? And so, you have guys that understand the scheme already, and then you have a guy in Kyle Van Noy that's played a lot of football, and he's widely regarded as a super, super, super intelligent player. So you bring that all together, and maybe it's gelling a little bit faster because of that familiarity that these guys have in the scheme from previous seasons.
And we heard from Staley last year that one of the problems was it took them longer than he thought to get everybody on the same page defensively. He didn't go after a bunch of his own guys after, going into his first season. On the defensive side, he made sure to go after guys like that. And the other guy is J.C. Jackson and Kyle Van Noy, which make a ton of sense too. But we do have some questions, a couple more we need to get to with Daniel Popper, the senior writer, covers the Chargers for The Athletic. Go subscribe right now. We're getting into the RB2 battle and some young players who have been standing out coming up right after this. We do have a couple more questions for Daniel Popper, but before we get into that, I do need to tell you guys that the official betting sponsor of the Locked On Chargers podcast is betonline.net. BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news for every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports like UFC on the weekends, esports, and even golf. I mean, I know I've been betting on a lot of UFC and golf without football here, but there's a ton of NFL futures you guys can get on right now. You can even find the odds for the first game of the season. Football season is coming, guys. Get on betonline.net because they have the best and most creative ways to bet. I'm a big prop bet guy. They have a lot of that. I'm a big live in-game betting guy, so I can change my fortune in real time. I love that with betonline.net. So make sure you guys head to the website or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening today at BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we are back here with Daniel Popper. You guys can find him on Twitter at Daniel R. Popper. Make sure you guys are subscribing to The Athletic for, I think, the best news and notes coming out of training camp. Just super in detailed notes about every single practice. And it's just the truth, man. It truly is.
Appreciate it.
He's such a great resource for us, especially since David lives in Texas, so he can't go to all the practices. So it's great. But I think one of the positions that's interesting right now, and I think a lot of people are talking about it, but I don't know if we can really make an evaluation yet, is the running back position, right? Because it's Austin Eckler and then everybody else. Like, I mean, Brandon Staley said there's 5 dudes competing for RB2 right now, right? So he's including the undrafted free agents like Kevin Marks and Letty Brown, right? But as we see it, right, the most likely scenario is it's going to be Isaiah Spiller, Josh Kelly, Larry Roundtree. It seems like they had Josh Kelly kind of as RB2, right, rotating in and out. so far to start camp, and it seems like that's been mixing around a lot. But like, is it going to take us seeing them in preseason when they're actually getting tackled, or has any of them done anything so far to really make a mark in any other way?
Yeah, it's completely open right now, and a lot of it's going to come down to these preseason games. I think all three guys, Joshua Kelly, Larry Roundtree, and Isaiah Spiller, are going to play in these preseason games, and you're really going to get a good look at, okay, can these guys break tackles? That's really like the only time you can figure that out is in preseason games. Had a great chat with running backs coach Derek Foster after Wednesday's practice. Talked to him for almost 20 minutes just about these three guys and what he's seeing out of them. That's going to be in one of these notebooks. One day when I don't have enough to write about, I'm gonna throw that in there. They really love how Joshua Kelly is progressing. He put on some weight this offseason.
He looked good. He looked better physically this year. He looked like there was like a physical
really
difference when I saw him.
Yeah. He's put on some weight, so they like that, physicality that will come from that extra weight, and then just his acceleration, his explosiveness, which is something we've seen. I think with Joshua Kelly, it's going to come down to confidence. He has all the physical tools, but he's just had some fumbles at really inopportune times that I think have affected his confidence, even going back to his rookie year when he had those fumbles in back-to-back games against the Panthers.
After starting really good. He started really good that season. It's easy to forget now.
Exactly. And I think like from that point on, he just hasn't had enough consistency to get over those fumbles and to really find that confidence. But he of the three guys, he's playing the most with the first team outside, obviously Austin's getting the most reps, but of those three guys, he's playing most with the first team, and we'll see what happens in these preseason games. And the other thing with Joshua Kelly that I would add is he's in year 3 now, right? So I think like from a pass protection standpoint, they've really seen a lot of development. As a rookie, that was a weak spot in his game, but talking to Derek Foster, he's telling me, hey, this is now a strength of his game. Like, we love what Joshua Kelly can do as a pass protector, and third downs and picking up blitzes and that sort of thing, which I was surprised to hear. Because
it seems like they practice that a ton too. Like, it seems like there's a huge focus on that from the running backs of like, all right, we're just going to keep doing pass protection. Because I remember Josh Kelly had a play last year where he got Justin Herbert lit up, right? He made the wrong read. A guy came off the edge, and Justin Herbert got lit up. And that's so important to gain the trust of your coaching staff, to be able to protect not just, not Baker Mayfield, protecting Justin Herbert. You can't let that guy just get a free run, right?
100%. So, we'll see in preseason games, we'll see it. We'll see what they can do when the live bolts are flying and they're not going up against the same defense and you're getting different blitz packages and different looks. Totally. With Larry Roundtree, Derek Foster told me that he's just really trying to get Larry to use his lower body, which he thinks is the strongest part of his running game. It's just how big his legs are and how powerful he is in his lower body, and getting him to use that, to break tackles and be that type of physical downhill runner that they think he can be. And then with Isaiah Spiller, he's just really young. He was the youngest player drafted of any player in all 7 rounds. And so, they feel like, he's got a ton of upside. So we'll see if that translates early on, or if it might take him a little more time to find his footing. They're definitely easing him in and phasing him in. I think he got, from my notes, he got his really first reps with the first team on Wednesday, and I think we'll see that those numbers grow. But the one thing is they love his mentality. When they were doing one-on-ones the other day, he went up against Kyle Van Noy in the first rep, and Kyle Van Noy just obliterated him, which is like understandable, right?
Yeah, that's gonna happen.
You're talking about a vet in this league, a grown ass man going up against a 20-year-old kid seeing, an NFL blitzer for the first time. Yeah. But what Derek Foster told me was really impressive was Isaiah Spiller came up next and he said, I want Kyle again. Right?
Okay. I want Kyle again. Kind of like Asante kind of had a moment like that last year, right?
Exactly. So I literally said the same thing to Derek Foster, because right when he was telling that story, Asante was walking by me, and I was like, Asante did the exact same thing with Keenan Allen last year, right? And like, you talk about like the dog mentality, right?
Yeah,
that's what you want in your young players.
Yeah,
like not tail between your legs walking to the back of the line. It's like, no, I want that again, and I'm gonna keep doing it right until I get it right, until I can face this level of competition and be successful.
Because that's what it's going to take. You're going to have to go up against somebody that good. You might as well get it, figure it out now.
Oh, exactly. Sure. Exactly. So you see the explosiveness. You see the downhill running.
Like big too.
Yeah, right. 100%. The route running has been very impressive. He's a really good route runner. He's got great hands. And you see it, like, you don't get the tackling, but there was a play in Tuesday's padded practice, and I think I wrote about this in my notebook, where he hit a hole and Amen Agbagbami was in the hole, and those two guys collided, and you could hear it. Like Amen felt Isaiah Spiller on that play, and so like that's what you want. We'll see how he progresses, but they like what they see so far, and we'll see how he performs in the preseason games. But they're confident they're going to find somebody out of these three guys, and they only think that the competition is going to breed the best out of these guys. We'll see if that comes to fruition. I have my concerns, and I posed this question to Derek Foster, and just like, why is this year different than last year? Because you went into the season last year thinking that you had a pretty good rotation behind Austin, and it didn't really work out. And I think the difference now is like Isaiah Spiller is a 4th round pick, a guy who was really successful in the SEC. He was in a pro style offense, and I think they're really hoping that he's going to take that job and never look back. So we'll see how it plays out, but I think that's the hope for the organization.
Austin Eckler is definitely paying very close attention. That is for certain. Every year there are players who kind of just burst onto the scene in training camp and make a name for themselves. Are there any young players who have surprised you at camp to this point?
I'll give you 4. Michael Bandy. Shout out to Michael Bandy.
Back years.
He's been even better in this training camp than he was last year, and he's getting more looks this year. Just a really polished player. Doesn't drop passes, great hands, great route runner. I mean, he put on a show in one-on-ones. I mean, he cooked Michael Davis on one slant route. Just like super polished route runner, really crafty. I don't know if he's going to make the roster, but that's a guy you stash on the practice squad, and you'd feel comfortable throwing him out into the slot if you needed to, and if you're in a pinch at some point. He can return punts, he can return kicks. So he brings a lot to the table, but I've been really impressed because when you're a player like that, you have to make every play that comes your way.
Have to.
Yeah, everything.
And it starts with a play here, a play there.
Sometimes that's still not enough, right? The margin for error is 0.
Right.
Yeah.
And then you gain some more confidence. You get to know the coaching staff. They start trusting you. You get a little more looks on the second team. You might get thrown in a first team rep if a bunch of guys are sitting out, and all of a sudden you're making plays there. And that's how you make a name for yourself. So Michael Bandy, I've been really impressed with him. Second one, Damon Lloyd. Missed all of last year with an injury. He was on IR. He got injured in training camp. He reminds me a lot of Denzel Perryman. Now, no one is Denzel in the sense that like he's built like a Greek god. No one is like that. But from the sense that like a little bit shorter, a little stocky, but just like super physical and a great hitter, and will get after people in the run game. He flashed some speed in the pass game, covering running backs in the flat. He's been really, really impressive. And again, I don't think he's a guy that's going to make the 53-man roster. But flashing enough to be on their radar and be a guy that they should absolutely keep on the practice squad. And then I'll throw the 2 corner draft picks out there.
Yeah.
Jasir Taylor and Dean Leonard do not look like a 6th and 7th round pick. Like, they look like guys that could legitimately contribute this year. We'll see if they're able to crack the 53-man roster. Right now, Jasir Taylor's playing pretty much exclusively in the slot. Looks really comfortable in there, though. And not everyone can play in the slot because there's just so much going on in the middle of the field, so much traffic. But he looks really comfortable in there. It's where he played last year. And I've been really impressed with just how he's been reading routes out of the slot, particularly like some outbreaking routes. He had back-to-back pass breakups in 11-on-11 the other day. And the last one, I mean, the whole defensive sideline erupted. So, he's looked really good. And then Dean Leonard, just strictly from an appearance, right? Like, you see him, you're like, okay, that guy looks like an outside corner. He's got some length, he's got some size, and then just the mentality again. Like, he will get up on guys, he'll press you. He might get beat, right? Jaylen Guyton beat him on a deep shot one time, but he's made some plays in the deep area of the field, and he will get up on people and press them and play with that aggressive mentality that Brandon Staley really loves out of his outside corner. So, I don't know if those 2 guys are going to be contributors this year, but they look like they could absolutely be legitimate NFL players down the line. And, I saw Brandon Staley talking to Jasir Taylor for like 5 minutes before, I think it was Tuesday's practice, just coaching him up. And I think that's indicative of how important Staley knows that the secondary depth is going to be this year after what happened last year. So, even if those guys end up on the practice squad, whatever it is, knowing like, hey, I'm watching you. Like, I know that you're important, and I know that your development is important. This is the head coach of the football team talking to a 6th-round pick. I think that will go a long way towards building his confidence. But they're really excited about both those guys. So there's 4 names for you.
4 names is more than enough. I mean, Urban Meyer didn't even want to learn the players on his own team's name. So having a head coach go spend that much time with a dude who is probably on the roster bubble, I think tells you a lot. He also, the practice I was at, it seemed like he stayed like 40 minutes just to talk to all the players' families and go up to every single one of them.
Yeah.
Just a special kind of dude. But it does also feel like, Pop, this year that it's going to be a harder year to make it as an undrafted free agent. Like, this is a pretty loaded team, a deep team. That cornerback room, like, even if they keep 6 corners, there are going to be some very, very tough decisions to make at the end of that, right? Because you have guys like Kamon Hall coming back too, right? And just guys who already know the system and stuff. I'm excited to see it. But Pop, thank you so much for coming on, man. We really appreciate it. Nobody's putting out better training camp content than you right now. The only thing that'd be better is if they let you take videos, and obviously you can't do that. But if you guys want to find the latest and everything coming out of Chargers training camp, this is the guy you want to follow on Twitter at Daniel R. Popper. You can also subscribe to The Athletic. I think it's one of the only paywalls I pay for. More than worth it. I would pay twice as much as I pay right now to have it. And it's just the content coming out is that good. So thank you, Pop, again. We will definitely be checking back in with you for sure. But thank you for everything on training camp. We appreciate it.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right. Well, another special thank you to Daniel Popper for coming on the show. Really do think he's putting out some great Chargers training camp content. And I am going to that every day I can't go. I'm checking in on what he says is going down. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. We will be back with you guys on Monday. As always, thank you guys for checking out the show. If you want to make sure you never miss a big interview like this, go subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, or also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. Whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever. And make sure to rate and review if you like the show too. It's always nice to get those. It definitely keeps me and David going. But we also post the show to all of our social media. So you can find it on my Twitter at Dan Talk Sports. You can find it on David Droegemeier's Twitter at DroTalk SD. And you can find it on the show's Twitter at LockedOnLAC. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Chargers. And we also have a Locked On Chargers Facebook page. But that is going to do it for today. Probably trying to get into some Twitter Tuesday next week. And on Monday, though, we're going to be recapping the Chargers scrimmage that's going down on Sunday. So make sure you're back here with us then. Until then, take it easy and go Bolts.